So
Hello.
welcome everybody. Hello and welcome to our October 2020 Women IT Pros catch up. Apologies for last month. Ignite kind of threw us as it did. It's a pretty big event, and my participation in it meant that not only did we have a date conflict, but then the week after I just needed a bit of downtime. As I was just mentioning to Jess earlier, I also moved house in that period, so it got all a little bit much. But we are here. The good part about it is that I've been on a couple of other calls where people have been doing their wrap-ups of Ignite, so I've been able to steal some of their ideas as well to talk about what went on at that event. As usual, my co-host is the amazing and very purple Jess Dodson. Say hello, Jess.
Hello, Jess. Hi, everyone. I would love to be on camera today, but unfortunately, I am definitely not fit for human consumption. And when it comes to Ignite, I was unlucky enough to be on customer calls. So I'm also interested not just in what Sonia is going to be saying, because I did get to watch a couple of sessions, but also in what you guys got out of Ignite and whether there are any sessions you think I need to be catching up on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the announcements in the session picks, as well as definitely having an IT pro focus, they're probably slightly biased towards the things that I enjoy and think are important. There are definitely more Azure announcements than there are for things like Windows Server, for example. There's not much happening in the on-prem space as far as being highlighted at Ignite. And so if there are things that you loved, Dynamics 365, Power Platform, any of that stuff, please feel free to jump into the chat. Send us a session name, a speaker that you liked, or even some links if you can find them in the Ignite catalogue. That will be really great, and we will get those added to the show notes. Thank you so much for registering for our new experience. We are experimenting with Eventbrite as the platform for publicising these meetings so that people can register and we can get an idea of numbers, but also it gives you that one central place to know what's coming up, when it's on. Download your ICS invite into your calendar, and I will get a link up to recording and show notes probably in the week after this event, so you've got that one place to go to. Excellent. Should we get into it, Jess?
Let's do it.
All right. Very rapid fire. We've got a lot to cover this afternoon. And as much as I'd like to sit and talk to you about Ignite for the rest of the day, I'm sure you've got other things to do as well. So let's go. Security. Jess, I started with security because I knew that this one was the one that we could drag out the most if we needed to. So it kind of is a forcing function for us to make this a little shorter. Security Center in Azure has a new security dashboard. So they've done a few updates to the user experience, some clarity around the security KPIs, and it's got a bit of a polish up to make things in it that are really important to our customers. So that has gone into public preview. It's available there for you to see if you're using Azure Security Center, and it's a really good single glass of pain, as I like to call it, in terms of all the things that you need to be aware of in terms of your security posture for things that Azure Security Center is monitoring. Now, on that Azure Security Center event, we've got this new thing called Azure Defender. Except it's not really new. And Jess, you probably understand this a bit more than me.
I understand this really well.
I've actually got a blog post to write next week, so I might be tapping Jess on the shoulder, because when I think of Defender, of course, I think of Windows Defender. And now we've got this new thing called Azure Defender, and I'm like, oh, is it a new product I get to deploy? But it isn't really, is it, Jess?
No. So Azure Defender is pretty much a rebrand. So Azure Defender, at the moment, the one that we've got in here, so you have Azure Defender for Servers, and Azure Defender for Servers is pretty much Security Center standard. That's what it is. So rather than having Security Center Free and Security Center Standard, which is what we had before, we have Security Center and Azure Defender being either on or off. So that way, if you've got it turned on, you get all of those benefits of what you had under Security Center Standard. And it makes it a little bit easier to kind of describe what we're doing with that Security Center Standard, which is now Azure Defender for Servers. It's being able to do that just-in-time administration. It's being able to do that extra bit of vulnerability management inside of your servers that you do have to pay for, that you do have to actually sort of subscribe for. So it's a little bit more in-depth security management for your Azure servers, which is why it's called Azure Defender for Servers. It makes a lot more sense to me now.
Fantastic. That's a great way to position it, Jess. Thank you for that. You helped me understand it a little bit more too. And there's also been some other interesting refinements as far as that security management. With Secure Score, for example, Secure Score gave us this rating number of how good or bad our security posture was across a whole range of things. But for customers, there may be some things that they need to have an exception on, and that may have been appearing as a negative in Security Center and reflecting as their secure score. So now we've allowed for more granular management of that secure score. So you can actually exempt certain resources from recommendations that come through that you have a valid business reason for not adopting that security recommendation. And you may have another way of mitigating that risk in your environment anyway. So that's just one of the little examples of some of the refinements that have come out to Secure Score and help you manage that security posture.
And it's really, really important because one of the things that we come across quite often, at least I know I do, and I'm sure Bronwyn does, I know Bronwyn's on the call, we often go off to customers and we understand that you guys will actually have processes and policies that are in place to mitigate these things outside of Azure. So you don't need us constantly telling you that something is a problem. You know that it's a problem. You're fixing it in another way. You don't need us to tell you that it's a problem. So being able to go in and actually make these exemptions is so important.
Yeah, and Secure Score is one of those things when you've got it integrated correctly into your IT management and your operations processes. It can be a very strong talking point to talk with management or talk to business units about the work that you're doing and why it's important and how it's changing that score. And you don't want to be trying justifying back to the manager or the business unit every now and again why that score isn't moving when you've got valid exemptions that you want from that recommendation. Excellent. All right. Azure Kubernetes runtime protection. So this is sort of an improvement to managing the security of that stuff that runs inside these Azure Kubernetes clusters and these containers, including things like runtime threat detection. So being able to analyze the behavior of the code that's happening inside those containers, as well as doing things like admission control policy management of who has access to that stuff as well. Kubernetes isn't particularly an area that I'm strong in, but I do understand both the benefits of a containerized workload and the benefits of knowing that when that stuff does run, it is running securely, because I'm comfortable with how I would manage the security and the threats on a server or in information protection, even in the data. And so it's nice to see that capability catching up now for these containerized workloads. And again, container image scanning. So not only Azure Kubernetes services, but the Azure Container Registries as well. Scanning the images that have gone up there, getting visibility if any of those container images have got vulnerabilities in them, for example. So it's all about extending those security principles to these different types of workloads that we're running now that aren't just servers.
And I think it's really wonderful that Microsoft is actually pushing forward to actually say it's no longer about just securing your IaaS stuff. It's securing everything. We want to secure every single thing you're putting up into the cloud. We want to assist you in securing it. Everything, all of the things.
All the things.
Oh,
we need that on a we need that on a sticker. Secure all the things.
I will make one of those.
Excellent. And then this kind of shows you the bigger story. So not only are we looking at security posture and compliance across Azure, but with Azure Arc, and I'll talk about that a little bit, we're also looking at workloads that aren't inside that Azure environment. So they might still be on-prem, or they might be, heaven forbid, in somebody else's cloud. But we know that happens, and it's all about using Azure as the control plane to help you manage those workloads across your IT infrastructure, no matter where it is. Okay, so let's talk about hybrid for a little bit then. Azure Arc we announced at a previous Ignite in preview, and it's just starting to grow even more. So originally when we looked at Azure Arc, it was known as a hybrid resource provider, and it was a way of in essence, Azure enabling something that wasn't in Azure, so that Azure's management tools could connect to that thing, could surface data back into the Azure management plane about this other resource, and then could also help us control and manage that thing outside of the Azure environment. And it's about trying to streamline your IT operations so that what you're doing in the cloud can extend through into all your other environments. What happens is with businesses that are very early on in their cloud adoption, they are used to doing IT ops in a particular way for their on-premise world, and then they adopt these cloud workloads and they're like, okay, well, how do I secure it? How do I update it? How do I manage it? How do I know if it's compliant? And they start to build up these processes for these cloud workloads, and now they're kind of running at not necessarily two different speeds, but they operate in two different modes, because they know, okay, if I want to achieve X, I've got to do it like this on-prem, but I've got to do it in a different way in the cloud. And it just adds an extra workload and overhead that IT ops does definitely not need with all the things that we do in a day. So Azure Arc takes this operational type tasks of securing, protecting, knowing what resource you've got as far as inventory goes, all of those things, and then making sure that we're plugging in all of those different resources, as I said, whether they're in someone else's cloud, whether they're on-prem, or whether they're edge. And so we're starting to increase the capability of Azure Arc. Ignite announced that Azure Arc enabled servers are now generally available. So we had an agent that could be deployed into other servers that weren't in Azure that was in public preview. That's now generally available. So that means that it is now protected by an SLA from Microsoft. It works for your Windows and Linux servers, and you can just see them in your Azure control plane as if they were another Azure resource, which is really great. But we've also introduced Azure Arc enabled data services. So reaching into some of those other resources and capabilities that aren't servers that we need to manage as well. I didn't think I had another slide on that. Have you done much with Azure Arc, Jess?
I haven't touched too much on it because the customers that I deal with, most of them are primarily already up in Azure. A couple of my customers have spoken to me about Azure Arc. They're interested in utilizing it, and having the Azure Arc enabled servers going GA has made them far more confident to start looking at using that. Yeah, really, really interested, because they have some workloads that are in other clouds. Why would they? So that they can then manage those in Azure, and particularly from that security perspective, because obviously that's where I come in from, being able to have everything in that one place to them, it makes life a lot easier. And because it's now gone GA, a lot of customers now feel a lot more confident because it's covered under those SLAs. It doesn't have that preview tag that scares a lot of people off.
Absolutely. And I do love that we have the capability to release things in public preview to get our early and eager customers to test it, to play around with it in their test environments. The feedback we get from our public previews is invaluable to go in and making the product even better before we tick that box to say that it is generally available and SLA backed. So we certainly appreciate the capability to do so. But then again, we do remind people that public preview features, products and capabilities are subject to change, not backed by an SLA. And so understandably, you don't really want to be putting them near your highly sensitive and critical production workloads for a while. But it's nice to see that go GA. And as you said, we'll probably get more customers looking at it now, which is great.
I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. Identity. Look, my highlight from identity, and as I said, this is not all the announcements from Ignite. We've picked some. We've only got a limited amount of time. But the one that really caught my eye was conditional access insights going into public preview. Now, it's interesting because after that little caveat that I said about, look, if it's public preview, you probably don't want it near your production environment. But for something like this, conditional access insights, it's going to give you recommendations similar to how Azure Advisor does about where you can potentially tighten up your conditional access policies for identity. Now, if you haven't touched conditional access before, conditional access is a really powerful complementer to multi-factor authentication, because when we talk to people about enforcing MFA, they think, that's going to be a complete hassle, because every time my users want to log in, they're going to be forced for a second form of authentication, and it's just going to drive them crazy. With conditional access, we can start to implement some smarts and some security rules that not only are ones we define. So we could define, for example, that Sonia isn't asked for an MFA code if I'm logging in from a known location on a device that's enrolled and compliant with Intune. So we know that Sonia works from home. That's her normal location. The computer that she uses is managed by Microsoft. We don't need necessarily to bug her for MFA. And then we can go a little step trickier and go, but maybe if she's accessing some highly sensitive information, then we might just want to enforce that MFA prompt. Or maybe we're good with her doing a day-to-day job, but if she pops up in a location that's unusual for her, and that did happen when I used to travel, then we would definitely want to force that MFA prompt, because it still may be a valid login attempt, but it's just sort of outside of the norm for Sonia. And then we can implement things like impossible travel rules, where this behavioral engine detects that, well, hang on a minute, Sonia logged in from Brisbane, and then 3 minutes later, she, logged in from a country that's on the other side of the world. There's no way that Sonia could have traveled that quickly to get to that other location. We think that this is probably a hacking attempt or somebody else, and we will block that from getting in. And the cool thing about conditional access when you go to that level is it's not about the rules that you build for your organization, and you can build your own rules, but it is very much using the power of our security signal analysis to see what's going on with these access attempts to block or challenge as well, and you can help refine that. Conditional access insights, though, as far as this feature that's in public, kind of looks at the gaps between what is happening to your environment and what policies you have configured to protect your environment. And it'll turn around and go, hey, here are some suggestions, here is some data about what's happening with your access attempts, and here are some areas that you might want to improve it. So it's kind of like Secure Score in terms of helping improve that security posture, but it's definitely focused on ways that you could improve your implementation of your conditional access policies to tighten up and better improve that experience. You got anything to add on that one, Jess?
I think for this one, I know we had that caveat around the whole don't use it for things that are kind of in public preview around your confidential data or your production workloads, but because of what this one is doing is reading information, you're not necessarily going to be making changes with this. What this is doing is just giving you those insights, and the changes that you're likely to see in here are going to be improving those insights. So the more you guys use it, the more insight you're going to get into how your users are utilizing conditional access and where you're seeing those failures and how you can improve it, the better this particular insight and reporting tool is going to get. So we would actually prefer people to be using this while it's in public preview. So please go and use it, pretty please.
Absolutely. When it is stuff like insights and reporting, when it's analyzing your activity and giving you recommendations, is much less of a risk.
Absolutely. And I mean, what's the harm in utilizing it to actually give you more information and give you more insight and give you more value into your data? There is no harm in using that while it's in a public preview. It's just an added bonus to you guys. So
absolutely, because you totally have the control over whether you go and implement those recommendations or not.
Exactly.
Awesome. Oh dear, I love working from home. Okay, Azure Data. I picked out a couple of these. Data isn't my strong area, but there were a couple of things that caught my eye. Cosmos DB now has a serverless option for small workloads. So if you are playing with small databases with Cosmos DB, you don't need to spin up a server and do an implementation of that. They've actually now got a serverless option, so I thought that was quite cool. And Azure SQL, Azure SQL, now has extended zone redundancy to our general purpose databases. So let's expand on that a little bit. Tanya, you might need to jump in and tell us why that's so cool for Cosmos DB, honey.
Hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tanya and I work with Microsoft in the data area. So that's why Sonia's so happy to see me jump on at the moment.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I'm really happy about this because the Cosmos DB options that we had, the server sizings weren't that great if you only had a really small data set you wanted to play with, just purely because of the expense. And you had to spin up that minimum server size. And so that's why I'm really excited about this. So for some of our customers who have got those really small loads, they can now, or just want to trial it and see without the effort of setting up all the servers, really easy option and way to do it. So that is awesome.
Amazing. Thank you for adding your insight into that. And zone redundancy for general purpose databases. So without getting too heavily into what zone redundancy means, it's basically a way of putting a redundant server in a separate availability zone. And when Microsoft goes and does maintenance on the underlying data center architecture, or we roll out updates to the server hosts, for example, we do that by zone. And so it reduces the impact on you if you have zone redundancy, that if one particular zone or area inside one of our Azure data centers has an issue because of a change that we're implementing, then you've got that failover redundancy in your server to another zone. And that was only available for the higher priced databases. Again, Microsoft has turned around and said, well, look, even the general purpose ones, we have customer needs to support that level of redundancy so that they know that they've got the availability of the services too.
And there are so many people who've been asking for this, and it's so exciting to see it go live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've got clients who are going to be screaming in happiness over this one.
Amazing. That's great to hear. Okay, Internet of Things. Again, not one of my strong areas, but there are a few things that caught my eye with IoT announcements. So Event Grid has been updated so that system topics are a thing. And system topics means that we now have a greater, another input source of what happens to an IoT device based on these events that happen, as well as a system topic being recognized as an event. It also means that third-party publishers can also publish events to their platform as if they were Azure events as well. So as I said, IoT is not my strong point, but again, this has come from a need to recognize some more of those sort of triggers for events for these IoT devices. And we mentioned Azure Defender before. Azure Defender for IoT is a rebrand of the Azure Security Center capability for our IoT devices. So we talked a little bit earlier about securing all the things, and one of the big concerns in enterprise customers is if I'm deploying smart sensors onto my dumb devices to communicate back to my network about what that dumb device is doing, how do I know that that particular box, that IoT device, is online, is up to date, it hasn't been hacked? There was a great story that went around a while ago, and I don't have a link to it, about a casino that got hacked through a smart temperature sensor in the fish tanks. So that's the kind of things that people freak out about in terms of managing IoT devices and the security of them. And with Azure Defender for IoT, we're bringing that threat management of those IoT devices into that refresh branding for the Security Center capability. And it does talk about things like this, about being able to notify you when a vulnerability has been announced on a particular device, being able to automatically detect new IoT assets without you having to deploy an agent to them first, analyzing the behavior of that IoT device and telling you if we detect that may be under attack, and then integration with one of Jess's favorite topics, Azure Sentinel.
Sentinel! Sorry, I'm very excited when things integrate with Sentinel. So yes, it is really nice to see that we're getting more and more things integrating into Sentinel, so you can actually have that proper single pane of glass as a seam inside of Azure. So the more things that we can integrate with Sentinel, the better it is for me. And for you.
Maybe your sticker should say Sentinel all the things.
Securely Sentinel, I don't know, we'll do something. We'll figure something out.
There's far too many S's.
Oh, this is the exciting one.
Moving right along, a couple of fun little announcements. Under the sea or up in space, where would you like your Microsoft services? So if you haven't heard of this project, you could have a big discussion about how it's actually pronounced. I've heard it called NATIC, I've heard it called NATIC, and I think the Americans on the video say something that sounds like NATIC, because they're not, their T very much sounded like a D with the whatever flavor of American accent it was. But it was basically some people that came up with this wild idea about would it be viable to put data centers under the sea, and they tried it in the waters off Northern Ireland. When I mention this to most people, they automatically think, well, that kind of makes sense because you wouldn't have to spend as much money cooling everything down, right? It's under a significant amount of water. You're not going to have heating issues with your servers inside that data center. But as well as that bonus, there's another one that people don't really think of that's really cool about this project, and it's got to do with how expensive land is and latency. So the best experience you will have as an end user is if your connection is as close as possible to where the data center is. And the challenge is that where most people are in our major cities, for example, it's really expensive to put a data center next to them because land in those areas is super expensive. So you have to make a financial trade-off of where you put data centers that are away from those environments so that they're financially viable, but then you've got to beef up all the network infrastructure to compensate for that latency that you'd get across that travel distance with the network connections. And so one of the cool parts about going under the sea is that the majority of those high density towns and cities around the world are located on or near coastlines. And so if we can actually use underwater real estate, we can get significantly closer to those population areas for a heck of a lot cheaper than if we put these things on land. Now, Project NATIC did actually sync one of these data center pods. They did a small proof of concept, and then they developed this thing here, which is now getting a power wash after they brought it back up under the sea. I think it was 115 days it was underwater. And being a research project, they did a lot of experimenting and put a lot of science behind it to see what would happen over that time period. And we're really excited to sort of crack it open and see how it had fared. The coolest thing to come out of that was they found that they had a 1/8 of the failure rate of the hardware components inside that capsule than they did compared to their on-land data centers. And there's a couple of reasons why we think that this may have been the case. The first thing is because we didn't have any humans going into that environment, we actually sucked all the oxygen out of it and we filled it with nitrogen. And so the way that hardware deteriorates and it oxidizes and reacts with the oxygen was removed because it was in an oxygen-free environment, which I didn't even think would be a thing that they would consider when they were syncing this data center, but it was one of the things they did and one of the reasons they think that contributed to it. The other thing is, yeah, it literally did not have any humans in it, and so it didn't have any maintenance engineers going in and bumping things and jostling things. It didn't have human heat, like sweat, like just all the stuff that comes with us being grubby people and going in and mucking around with the hardware sometimes. So they were kind of hoping that they would get at least parity of a failure rate, but to find out that that failure rate was 1/8 of the amount that they actually get on land was pretty surprising. If you're interested in all the cool geekiness about that under the sea project, natic.research.microsoft.com. There's some cool little videos and some more in-depth information into that project. It was cool one. Hey, Jess.
It was. I loved reading about how they actually did the measurements of these failures, but also I really liked hearing about some of the issues that they had around it. So like, if your blade does die, how do you fix it if it's at the bottom of the ocean? So it was things like that. But with the 1/8 failure, it meant that and the redundancy that they had built into it, it meant that they didn't have to bring it back up. It was seriously, the read on it is fantastic. Go and have a read. You'll love it.
Yeah, I'm not getting my scuba license anytime soon. Sorry. And on the opposite end of the scale, Azure Orbital was announced. So Azure Orbital is about connecting satellite operators and communication directly to Microsoft Azure. So now you can control your satellites from Azure. Again, this is one that's really fascinating to get into the details of. I can't help but picture an evil Leia stroking a big white fluffy cat controlling my satellites, and I'm pretty sure that that's not what it's intended for. But to even know that we're partnering with organizations that are innovating in that space, that are actually connecting, space satellite resources into Azure, was completely mind-blowing. Like, nobody saw that one coming, and it's a pretty cool project.
No, and for me, this one didn't even hit my radar until Ignite. Like, I hadn't seen anything about it, and then I'm like, oh my God, we're going to take over the world. So yeah, I actually did imagine the stroking that, and I actually do have fluffy cats, so this works really, really well for me. But no, to go from the bottom of the ocean to orbiting in space, I just think you talk about pushing boundaries.
All right. And look, I said I wasn't prepared to get my scuba license. I am a bit of a NASA fan, so I think that if you told me I had to suit up and go into space to fix a satellite, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I'm totally down for that. I'm more than happy to become an astronaut. That is totally fine.
Guys, you can take the space, I'll take the scuba.
Oh, so, yeah, you scuba, that's right. Yeah, amazing. All right. That was some highlights of what we thought was pretty cool from Ignite. But Microsoft actually makes it a little bit easier for you to understand what was announced with our Book of News. So the Book of News is available free online. It's a public publication, and the best thing about it is it has a table of contents. So it's a sort of a PDF style format, but under the table of contents, all of the announcements are grouped together by the different products or areas that they relate to. And then they all have a small summary of what the thing was with a link to learn more. And that might be a product group blog or some more information about that particular announcement. So go and have a look at the Book of News, scan through the table of contents, look at the products that I haven't mentioned that you're interested in, and it's the best place to find a summary of all of the new and exciting things that were announced at Ignite. All right, sessions. Let's dive into some. There were so many, so we have picked a few favorites. Starting with our keynotes. So the keynotes are always interesting. I love hearing Satya's vision as he pulls different things together and gives us some insights into some success stories. So Satya talked about building digital resilience. Jared Spataro talked about the future of work, and James Phillip and his friends did a great update on Microsoft Power Platform and how that's helping people out in the world. If you're viewing this presentation through the Microsoft Teams client, you should be able to click on those links and go straight to those sessions on the Microsoft Ignite webpage. If you're not, I will get these put into the show notes on the Eventbrite page so you can go and click them, because I don't expect you to look for that session number. The URLs are a little ugly. Other favorites, I have picked a bunch. Vasu is one of our corporate vice presidents in the security, compliance and identity space, and does a really good update on achieving resilience with security, compliance and identity. Julia White and friends talk about inventing with purpose. There's a lot of Azure focused stuff in that session, including Erin Chappell, who is the lead for Azure Compute, which is all of the more VM and infrastructure type stuff that I like playing with. And then Charles does a session on building agile processes with Power Apps. Of course, Power Apps is an area that we're seeing more and more people jumping on board with and playing with to enable their businesses to do cool stuff. Panos Panay and Brad do an unplugged session on new hybrid work styles with Windows and Microsoft 365. Panos is amazing because he leads our Surface devices. And if you've ever seen a Surface device, they are just beautiful. And so they talk about what work looks like at the moment. And in particular, I think there's a couple of nods there to our new dual screen devices like our Surface Duo that are coming out, and what they're expecting the work of the future to look like. I mentioned a little bit about the data center in terms of the Project Natick being under the water, Mark Krasinovich does an incredible session on inside the Azure Data Center architecture. Now, he does this at every Ignite, but it just gets better and better. And one of the coolest things that he says in this session that I love is he does a comparison between the spec of the physical servers we were putting into data centers when we first launched versus the mega Godzilla beasts that we're using now, that you generally have a smaller physical footprint, but the processing power and the storage inside these is just phenomenal compared to the early days. I was fortunate enough to do some inside training on our Azure data centers, and I thought I knew a little bit about data centers. Like, I've been around enterprise computing for a while. I've done my time in freezing cold server rooms with very high levels of security. And I sat in on one of our Azure data center sessions and took everything I knew about data center architecture and threw it out the window. Because when you go to cloud scale, it is a completely different ballgame. It's not just like enterprise squared. And the things that you assume and expect a data center to look like from an enterprise perspective, no. So, and Mark is really great because he's open and honest as much as he can be in the public space. And then Cam does a very good session on Windows Virtual Desktop. So if you're looking at playing with that in your organization, go and check out Cam's session. We do also, finally, I've added a few little sessions from our locals. So I got the honor of interviewing Mark Anderson. Now, Mark Anderson is the National Security Officer for Microsoft Australia. Mark's day-to-day job really is making sure that the infrastructure, assets and data that is owned and operated by Microsoft here in Australia is kept secure. But because of that, we have a lot of customers saying to Mark, so what does Microsoft do? And Mark is great at talking to people about how he views security, what's top of mind for him in terms of the current risks. And we did a bit of a wrap up about what we've learned as an organisation over the last 6 months with the COVID virus and with more of our staff working remotely. Very applicable to anybody. He talks about the current threats that you need to look out for. And that, because it was an interview, it's only a 15-minute session. So if you don't have time to watch anything else, that's a nice short one.
It's on my list. I haven't watched it yet, and it is on my list to watch. It's already in my, I think, is it briefcase or whatever they call it? My backpack. I have my backpack full, and it's top of my list.
Excellent. That's great. So I had the pleasure of delivering a session with my only Australian colleague, Oren Thomas, who is down in Melbourne, and we did that remotely together via Teams on IT operations in a cloud world. So we were asked to do more of a careers style session, and here's the dog. So my team put together a talk that we delivered in the different time zones. I have a couple of colleagues in North America, the US and Canada that delivered it in their time zone. And then I have a colleague in Switzerland and one in Glasgow, and they delivered the European time slot together. So our team put together our thoughts into one session about what we thought was important for people doing IT ops now that this cloud is maybe not quite so much a fad, and delivered that in the 3 different time zones with a local flavour, so you can check that one out. And Jess, tell us about your session.
Bronwyn, feel free to chip in here. We had a fantastic discussion around how do we sleep at night, and I think it was more around how do we not sleep at night, knowing what we know and some of the things that we wished people would do more of, and giving some highlights around what we consider to be our biggest risks and what we consider to be our biggest security pointers. So Bronwyn, how do you reckon it went? I personally feel like I think our session went well. There was us and 3 others. We had 3 MVPs on the call with us. So we had Adam, and I cannot remember who else we had on the call. Bronwyn, do you remember who else we had on our call?
3 guys. I'm trying to remember their names. I'm really bad with remembering names, unfortunately.
I remember we had Adam Fowler, we had Mark O'Shea, because I remember doing a session with him, and Cameron. That's right, it was Cameron. And it was a fantastic talk. Like, we all bounced really well off each other. We all had really different perspectives on where we see security, because we all obviously sit in very different roles. And I think that's probably the big one when it comes to security, is every organization is different, but when it comes to security, pretty much everyone's battles are the same. They just range in size. So it was a really cool I thought it was a really cool topic to discuss.
We had a lot of engagement from the people who attended as well. Like, people were just throwing out questions in the chat and coming off mute and talking to us. So, I mean, half an hour was barely enough time to talk about security issues and how security professionals sleep at night. Like, next year, we definitely have to have like an hour for that session.
At least I think that one we definitely needed more time. We were scrambling as it was.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad that you brought up the engagement part. One of the things that we know is a challenge is, how do you replicate the chances that you get at an in-person conference to talk to people and ask questions? And it's not the same with the digital experience online. The good thing is that a lot more people can attend than would have been able to fly over to Orlando, for example, and afford that trip or that time to go over there. But it's not the same, and it does make it hard. So absolutely, the more that our audience jumps into the chat and asks the questions during those sessions, the better. And yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act to manage that when it ramps up at scale. But it's certainly one of the things that we're looking at. We've already started talking about planning for the next Ignite event, because they're now planning 2 a year. So the next Ignite is going to be sometime early in 2021, and we are learning the lessons from the last event, taking on board people's feedback and trying to see how we can reinvent some of the experiences, keep what worked and what people loved, and maybe turn up in some new ways for the event in 2021, in early 2021. So that's already well underway. If we have not put your favorite session in there, if you're interested in finding out about other products that I haven't mentioned, you can go to myignite.microsoft.com. I'm slightly embarrassed to say that you will see a picture of Satya and some of his friends on that main screen, me included, which was quite the surprise. And I'm sort of still pinching myself, but on that myignite.microsoft.com page, you will be able to get into the session catalog, and there you can search and you can filter and you can find all of the sessions that happened, to find the ones you're interested in and view the video recordings of those sessions to watch them at your pace. Heidi has asked whether there is a group like this in North America. There most certainly is. I don't know if Kathy is still on. Kathy's on a call. Have you got a chance to say hi, Kathy?
Hi. My video is bad on this computer, but yeah, I'm here. We aren't doing any more events for 2020 because we take November, December off. But in January, we will be back with a very full agenda.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we have consolidated all of the different regions into the WomenITPros organization on Eventbrite. So if you go to the same Eventbrite page that you would have used to register for this event, you will see the North American ones pop up under that same banner, which is great. I am going to put one last plug in before we wrap up. I've just thrown a link into the chat about a blog post that I wrote the other week, which was a fun little technical challenge to try and figure out. And so we're kind of looking at what IT ops looks like in the world right now, especially when we're sort of dealing with different systems and different communication methods. And one of the cool things I love about working at Microsoft is the integration between our different products and how they can all work together. So I took a look at, if I was an ops and I wanted to know if something in Azure wasn't available and I wanted to surface an alert in Microsoft Teams, how would I do that? So I went down the path of looking at a monitoring aspect of Azure called Resource Health. Resource Health is really cool because it will detect if a resource is unavailable. And that resource, because of things like Azure Arc, doesn't necessarily need to be a resource that's in Azure, it might be an Azure Arc enabled resource. It doesn't necessarily need to be a VM. There is a list of Azure products and services that are supported by Resource Health. And it doesn't have to be that it was an outage with Azure that made that resource unavailable. It might be because someone in my team accidentally shut it down either through the Azure portal, or if it was a VM, if they were logged into an RDP session and they issued a shutdown command by accident, Resource Health would detect that that resource is unhealthy because it's unavailable. The cool part about the integration is using Azure Monitor in conjunction with Logic Apps and getting the sample payload data of what does that alert look like. So when Resource Health sends me an alert and triggers a notification that my resource is now unhealthy, that has a certain structure, a certain data schema. The interesting thing was finding out that that sample payload isn't documented. And so guess who's now responsible for making sure that gets added to our official documentation, which is actually a part of this job that I really like, knowing that I'm going to improve it for the next person. But I worked with a product group, got the sample data, put it in the blog post, and I got posting into Microsoft Teams when my virtual machine had been shut down. So it was a fun little exercise to play around with that data schema, and getting that sample payload data for the Logic apps to fire made all the difference in the world. And as I said, we'll get that added into the documentation. Jess, what have you been working on that you want to crow about? Give us one of your success stories.
I have been working, it's been lovely. I haven't actually been doing Sentinel for quite a while. I've been spending some time doing Azure administration and governance. So I think what I would like to crow about is that it's not just, I mean, we talk a lot in these, particularly the IT Pro ones, we talk a lot about the tech, but I do want to emphasize that it's also about the people, and it's you guys, it's the professionals who are doing the job that are so important to getting it right. And the fact that you guys are coming along to these kind of talks and listening to what's going on and learning new things and wanting to know what's happening is so valuable, because that's what then drives you guys to do things better in your jobs, and what makes administration and governance of your systems so much better, because it's not just we've done it, now we don't have to touch it. It's what can we do to make this better? And so I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone coming along to these things so that you can grow and you can get better.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end our call this month. If you know anybody who you think would be interested in these calls, please publicize the Eventbrite page. We'll get one up for the November event once we've got some details for it, but we'd love to grow this audience. So please go out and share it with your friends. Thanks for your time. Feel free to drop in the chat if there was anything else that we missed that you think was important. And I'll let you have a little bit of your time at the end of the hour to go take a break from that computer screen, and we'll see you in November. Thanks, everyone.